Okay, hi, good evening to all of you. We will start, there are a few more people coming in fact, about half more. We have 102 participants this evening, and there are now about 42 of you, right? So welcome to the webinar on Inclusive Dementia-Friendly Community. I'm Clarice, I'm actually with the Central Health organization anchored by Tock Seng Hospital. And with me, we have the speaker today, who is Mr. Ivan Low. All right, I'll introduce him in a short while. So just a little bit more about the Partners Network, right, which co-organized this webinar. We are really coming together to raise awareness on dementia-related skills and knowledge in our aspiration to build local communities where persons with dementia can be understood, respected, supported, and most importantly, engaged as members of the community. So the partners represented are shown in the logo on the screen, right? Go to the next page. Okay, so I would like to just bring you through some very general guideline before we have the speaker come on to share with us. Thank you for coming in early. We really appreciate that. And you have already entered your name, right? So for your convenience, we're actually muting all participants on entry, right? So that the speaker can complete the presentation. And at the end, right, we would like to request you to raise your hand button, right? So that you can ask questions. Right, we also encourage you to keep your video on as we would like to record this session for learning purposes. And do jot down any lessons learned and answer the evaluation form at the end of the webinar. We really appreciate you would do that. So you will give us a lot of valuable feedback. So to introduce Ivan, right, Mr. Ivan Low is actually with Lien Foundation, and he's here to share with us on how to speak to someone with dementia. He has a lot of experience and worked with a lot of caregivers over the last 4 years. So I will let him elaborate more, right? And we now have pleasure to invite Ivan to come on board to share with us on the topic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clarice, for the introduction. Good evening, dear friends. Can you hear me clearly? If you can, just give me a thumbs up. Thank you very much. I saw some familiar faces. Thank you for coming this evening to join us and so that we can learn together. My name is Ivan. I'm from the Lien Foundation. So a large part of my work is actually dementia related. And during the course of my work, I was very privileged to have this opportunity to interact with many caregivers who is looking after someone with dementia. And I think I learned a lot from them. And that's why a lot of things that I'm going to share with today is also what I learned from them. And through their sharing, I learned that actually, in order to provide good quality of care to the ones that they love, communication is a very important part. You know, understanding the person, understanding his likes and dislikes. So communication is actually a very key part of the caregiving journey. And I was also very privileged that in the first 8 months of my work, I was attached to Kwan Hospital in Yishun. I was actually following a team of dedicated doctors and nurses specializing in dementia care. And we do activities for newly diagnosed dementia patients when their family come together with them for consultations. And that experience has actually enabled me to understand much more better about dementia, how it manifests, and also to understand persons with dementia so much more better. So today, whatever I'm going to share with you is actually what I've learned through the last 4 years. I don't claim to be the expert in this, but I think I would like to share with you what I've learned from so many of these wonderful caregivers and professionals that I've come across. So I'll now do a screen sharing. So can you see this thing? Okay. So I think to begin with, I would like to just share with it, because the topic for today is how to speak to someone with dementia. But I felt that I want to go one step further to say that, you know, it's more than just speaking, but we want to communicate with persons with dementia. What's the difference here? I think in communicate, we do not just speak, but we also want to get a response from the person with dementia. So what I'm trying to emphasize here is actually it's a two-way process. It's not a one-way process. So speaking and listening and getting a response from them is actually very important. And the second thing about communication, which is very important, is actually very much about relationship building. We want to know this person better. We want to understand who he is, so that in order for us to understand his needs better. So I think in communication, so 2 points that I would like all of us here to maybe try to remember. That is, one is about it's a two-way process, and the second point is very much about relationship building. So to begin, I'd like to share with you a short video clip by this lady called Thye. Let's take a look.
I think a lot of caregivers, because of their stress, they've been spending 24 hours, 365 days with a person with dementia, they lose control of their temper. You would tend to use a harsher tone of voice. When you use a harsher tone of voice, the person with dementia would tend to get aggressive, or they turn violent because they feel that they are not treated well. They feel that you are not friendly, you are not warm, you don't care about me. I think showing care and passion towards a person with dementia is very important if you want cooperation and trust. Our tone of voice is very important. When you sound harsh, they will feel that you're not friendly. But if your tone of voice is at the right wavelength, they'll feel more at ease. We must not raise our voice at them, even though they do mistakes. We should say, Ama, I think the eye contact is important. You tend to read the person better, so you will be more cautious of your tone of voice. When you build the trust, they will share with you all the issues that they have. Building up the rapport with them will help them to feel comfortable.
Okay, so I think in this video, what we have learned from Lily was that communication is not just about the words that we use, right? The tone of voice is very important. The body language is very important. Eye contact is very important. Okay? So a lot of times, I think the person with dementia, they may not fully understand what we are trying to say, but nevertheless, they can feel the tone of our voice if we are respectful to them. Okay? And also eye contact, as what Lily has mentioned, is also very important, because when we look at them in the eyes, it's a form of connection as well. Okay? And of course, last but not least, is the body language that she mentioned. Okay? So for example, when we talk to someone with dementia, especially a senior, it will be good for us to sit down and talk to them eye to eye level, and not to stand up, and talk down to them. And that is what sometimes makes them feel not respected. And that is where we find it a bit harder to get their cooperation. So I would also like to share with you that this video is actually part of a series of video resource that was developed by Lien Foundation in collaboration with ADA and Kutipot Hospital. It is a series of 50 caregiving videos in bite size. Each video is only 2 to 3 minutes, very short, but it covers on the different aspects of dementia caregiving. So if you would like to learn more from this video resource, in the chat box now, you will see that there's a link there, forgetusnot.sg. All the social media channels that you have, because we believe that it will be very helpful for anybody, especially those new caregivers who are very new in the journey. But even if we have been on this caregiving journey for a few years, there are always some things that we can always learn. And I also take the approach that I'm always also learning from other people as well. So I think talking about communication, I would like to just share with you maybe an acronym. Singaporeans, we like acronym very much, right? So this is the CARE approach, the C-A-R-E, okay, which I'd like to share with you now briefly in summary. What does the C-A-R-E stands for, and how can it help us to communicate better with persons with dementia? The C stands for clear, simple, and patient. Okay. I'll elaborate further in the following slides. The next one is to acknowledge the persons with dementia, their concerns. That's A. R is respectful and reassuring. And E is engage to provide comfort and build trust. So let me just go on to elaborate further. So what does clear consist of? Simple and patient. What does it consist of? First of all, I think it's very important for us to try to speak in short and simple sentences. Persons with dementia, a lot of times, as their condition progress, it becomes harder for them to actually understand complex sentences. So, for example, right, instead of saying that, have you had your lunch or have you had a dinner, we can just simply ask them, have you eaten? And perhaps a little bit of gesturing sometimes may help as well to enable them to better understand what we are trying to say. So short sentences are very helpful and keep the words simple as possible. Second one is slower pace of talking. This is one of my pain points, by the way. I tend to speak faster. So when I'm speaking to someone with dementia, I had to make an effort to slow down a little bit. The reason is because a person with dementia, when their condition progresses, they take a longer time to understand us or to progress or to process messages that is coming to them. So it's important for us to slow down in order that they can listen and be able to process the message. So slower pace is actually very helpful. So younger people especially tend to speak a little bit faster. So we normally have to actually suggest to them, when you're speaking to elderly in general, not just for person with dementia, please speak a little bit slower. And not to forget, some of the seniors, they also develop hearing difficulties as they age. The third point is one question or one task at a time. So again, I think I want to just emphasize that a person with dementia, if we try to ask them 3 questions at a time, 3 questions, by the time you reach the third question, the first 2 questions may have been forgotten, okay, because they are not able to retain 3 questions at the same time. So their recent memory is actually weaker. So it will be good for us to actually ask 1 question at a time, or if we hope that they can do something, to do 1 task at a time. So for example, one of the caregivers actually shared also in the video resource about how he was trying to get his father to go for a haircut. But going for a haircut for us is not a big deal. But to get someone with dementia to go out for a haircut, we need to guide them along. So for example, in his case, he has to tell the father, okay, father, now go and change first. Change your clothes first and change your pants. Once change already, okay, go there and wear your shoes. Then after that, bring the father down. So father, we are now going down out of home. We're going down to take a bus. Okay. Then on the bus, then tell the father that, okay, we are now on the way to the barber shop, for example. And then once arrive and tell the father, this is the barber shop. So I think it's important for us to break down complex tasks into small tasks. That will actually help them very much. So again, the principle behind this is a person with dementia, they may find it harder to do complicated tasks, and multitasking is even more challenging for them. So it's always 1 question at a time or 1 task at a time. The next point, very important, be patient to wait for a response. So again, they do need time to recall some information. And sometimes, if our question was not so clear to them, we may need to repeat our question and wait for the response. So that is, again, is very important. So we actually highlight here that actually patience is actually a very important part of communicating with a person with dementia. So do not be afraid to repeat your questions. And last but not least, our visual aids. So sometimes when the person needs something and he couldn't tell you. So for example, I have a water bottle here with me. So a person with dementia who needs to hydrate himself, who needs to drink, he may not be able to tell you that, I need the water bottle, but he may gesture to you something like, I need that thing, that drinking thing. So sometimes if we find that they do have some difficulties in understanding us, we can actually use some visual aids. Today with smartphones, it's a lot easier. We can actually, just Google a photograph and show to them, is this what you want? Something like this. And that will actually helps to actually for us to understand what they need. Or if they don't get what we are trying to say, when we show them pictures, it actually helps them to straight away see it and understand what are the items that we are referring to. Okay, the second part is acknowledge their concerns. So what are some of the concerns of a person with dementia? Okay. First of all, notice their emotions or mood. I'd like to give you an example that I come across and to probably guide you through the 3 points here. So there was once when I was attached to a dementia daycare center, I came across this man. He's well educated and he previously was working in quite a good job. And in fact, when he was in the daycare center, he dressed very well, even better than me, right? Dressed very well. So there was once when I observed that he was sitting by himself and he looks very worried. So he was like, his facial expression like this. So the eyebrows was all coming together, looking visibly worried. So I noticed the emotions. I knew that obviously he was not in quite a good mood. So I went to him and I asked him, so Mr. So-and-so, what happened? You look worried. So he told me, he said that, my children are at school. Nobody is picking them up, and I also worry whether they have their lunch. So this is a man who is in his late 60s. Right? So obviously we do know that, right? At his age, children actually grown up already. But the issue is that dementia can cause a person's memory to regress. So they start to believe or imagine that they are younger. So for example, if today this gentleman, imagine himself to be in his 40s, then to him, his children will still be young at school. So it's natural for him to believe that the children are still studying and the children is actually at school waiting for him to fetch them. So the next step, what I did was to reaffirm what he believed or what he feels. So it could be something like, oh, Mr. So-and-so, so you're worried about your children in school, right? Okay, I can understand that because you are worried that they didn't have their meals. You are worried that nobody actually fetched them from school. Am I right? So he said, yeah, correct. I'm very worried, I don't know what to do. So the next step was that I offered to help him. So what I told him was that, why not this way? I give a call to your children, and tell them to go back home first, and they will have lunch at home because their mother has already prepared lunch for them. So he was quite happy. The moment he heard that, I was going to help him to call the children, his mood actually changes and he lightened up a little bit. But he asked me a very good question. Okay? He asked me, how did you have my children's telephone number? So that was really a test for me. Okay? So I just told him that, I actually don't have the number, but the staff who is working in the office, because he knows that that place is a center, right? So I told him that the center staff has the number of your children. So I can get them to actually call your children, right? To ask them to go back home first and have their lunch, okay, before you go back. Okay. So the next thing that I did was really, stand up and I walked towards the office, and I stayed there for 1 to 2 minutes. And then I walked back to him and told him, Mr. So-and-so, the office staff has already called the children. So your children are on their way back home and they will have their lunch. So please don't worry. So immediately, that intervention itself actually helps to resolve or to actually to so-called assure him so that he doesn't worry anymore. But there are some challenging situations which I also observe that sometimes this person may be emotionally very agitated. And no matter what you do, sometimes it may be hard to actually get them to actually change their mood. So a very effective strategy that we can also use is what we call diversion. We try to divert their attention away from their emotions. So again, I had this lady, this auntie in the daycare center. The time was around 2 o'clock, 2 p.m. Okay. So he was there for a whole day normally, but at around 2 p.m., she started to feel restless, and she wanted to go back home. Okay, and she was quite agitated that, why am I here? I want to go back home. This feels like a prison to me. Blah blah blah. So she insists on going back home. So the emotions was very strong. So what happened was, I get her to sit down first, and then I started to chat with her, things that make her happy. So for example, I asked her, hey, how many children do you have? How many grandchildren do you have? You know, do your grandchildren come and visit you? Blah, 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 you know, and ask her about anything about her family, you know, things like that, just to make her lighten up. So after around 20 minutes of chit-chatting, so that is my effort to divert attention away, right, from her anxiety of want to go back home. After 20 minutes, she started to calm down, you know, she forgot about going home. And then the next activity came along, which was actually sing along. Okay. Straight away, she joined the sing along and she forgot totally about going home already. So sometimes in the most difficult situation, diversion can be a very effective strategy for us to acknowledge if we cannot acknowledge their concern, diversion is a very good way for us to actually change their state of emotions at that point in time and to diffuse the tension. The next one is R, respectful and reassuring. I think this is the part that Lily in the video actually has mentioned quite a bit. I'm just going to briefly go through it again. So friendly and caring tone, I think that has been talked about just now. So I think we really have to be careful with our tone of voice because in fact, for persons with dementia, as their condition deteriorates, they will find it much harder to rationalize. So the tone of voice is very important to them because it's from the tone of voice that they sense or they feel if this person is being friendly to them or not being friendly to them. So the tone of voice is actually one of the ways that they can sense the people around them. Next one, very good, very important, put on a smile. And that is indeed is very helpful because when we put on a smile, that is also a show of friendliness, right? So, and especially when the senior is actually feeling anxious, right? And if we can offer them a smile, a lot of times it helps a lot to reassure them. And again, as I said, and a very important thing to also note is that persons with dementia, sometimes they do mirror our emotions or they mirror our facial expressions. So when we smile at them, there's a higher chance they will smile at us. But if we show them an angry face, there's also a higher chance that we will get an angry face in return. So they do mirror our emotions, they do mirror our facial expressions. The third is maintain eye contact, as I mentioned earlier, also by Lily as well. You know, eye contact is actually a form of respect. I always remember when I was young, my parents taught me, you know, when we talk to people, maintain eye contact, very important. But this is becoming a challenge today because of smartphones. People are, you know, their eyes are always glued to the phones, and sometimes when we talk to people, we are also fiddling with the phone. So very little eye contact nowadays. So I think it's important for us to bring that back, you know, especially when we are caring for someone with dementia. The eye contact means a lot to them because that is a form of connection. That is a form of respect. Fourth, avoid questions that challenge them. Okay, what do I mean by that? Okay, give an example. I come across some so-called places, public spaces where they actually start to welcome or organize activities for persons with dementia. So they are not a dementia so-called care provider, but they do welcome seniors with dementia, for example, to come to their space, to have activities. And a lot of times they do get some young volunteers to help. So some of these activities are actually go on for a few weeks. So there was a situation whereby the seniors came the first week. So when they returned for the second week, one of the young volunteers was very enthusiastic and very happy to see the same senior, right? So the young volunteer actually asked the senior, "Uncle, do you remember me? Do you remember me?" It was nothing out of bad intention, but that question becomes a big challenge for the senior. Why? Because the senior actually froze there, don't know how to respond because obviously I don't remember your name. I may not even remember that I came here last week. So the moment the question was asked, then, "Do you remember me?" which was actually a form of greeting, that becomes a challenge to the person with dementia. So we do have to be mindful of not asking questions that makes them feel challenged or make them feel embarrassed. So probably another example will be, "Do you remember that we did this last week?" So again, trying to actually get them to remember something and asking them if they remember. that a lot of times make the situation very awkward. And then suddenly you find that this elderly is totally silent because he or she doesn't know how to respond, because they are really struggling to remember the person or what has been done previously. So I think these are the kind of questions that we have to be careful to avoid. And last but not least, I call this the golden rule, right? I put a bracket there, golden rule. Do not argue with them. Why is this very important that I say it's golden rule? We have to recognize the fact that a person with dementia, as their condition progresses, their reality and our reality can be very different. In another way, I can say that a person with dementia, they are like living in a parallel world. So we are in the same space, but yet their understanding of reality and our understanding of reality can be very different. And the important thing is that if we are caring or trying to communicate with someone with dementia, it is important for us to understand their reality and to try to go into their reality in order for us to understand where they're coming from. But a lot of times, I think we have this habit of trying to pull the person with dementia back to our reality. So there is a tussle there. So end up, we can have a lot of arguments with a person with dementia. Okay. Give a very simple example. A retired uncle with dementia, retired for 20 years already. So today is Tuesday, but he can tell you today is Sunday. Do you want to correct him? Uncle, today is not Sunday lah. Today is Tuesday. You are wrong. Or for example, now is the year 2020, but uncle, you may believe that now it's 1990. Do you want to correct them and tell uncle off? Uncle, you remember wrongly already. Yeah, this year is 2020 already. It's not 1990. So sometimes it's important for us to also reflect that is it so important for us to be right? Is it so important for the person with dementia to know the truth as we know it? So sometimes it may not be so important after all. And we don't lose anything by actually giving way to them. So they say, Uncle says Sunday law, it's okay. Well, anyway, he doesn't work every day, right? So every day feels like Sunday. What's wrong with that? So there is no need for us to actually argue with them. But really what we want to do is go into their world, understand them, and we try to engage them in their world, in their reality. The last one, E, engage to provide comfort and build trust. I'd like to share with you 4 points here. The first point, which I also mentioned right at the start, when I talk about communication, is about relationship building. So I think we seek to bond with the person that we are caring for, or the person with dementia who is right in front of us. We seek to build a relationship with them. Indeed, one of the caregivers that I came across, he actually shared with me how that even though dementia is not a condition that we wish anybody to have it, even more so if it's our loved ones, but he actually shared how when after his own mother had dementia, that actually allows him an opportunity to reset the relationship that he had with the mom. So he actually shared that when he was younger, he had a very difficult relationship with the mom because the mom was a very strong lady. She's the matriarch of the home, quite domineering. Okay, and he being the only son in the family, he also has a very strong character as well. So mother and son never see eye to eye. They always have a lot of clashes. But when dementia sets in, the mom actually starts to forget a lot of the unhappy incidents in the past, and the son realized that because of that, a lot of the unhappy memories can be let go of, and he began to build a new relationship with the mom. And today, he felt that he's so much closer to the mom, and the mom is like a good friend to him. So I think a very important thing that we want to do is, regardless of our past relationship with this person with dementia, we seek to actually continue to build a relationship with them. Perhaps this relationship will have to be redefined. So for example, a person who used to be your parent, but after dementia, you may have to treat this person like a friend. So it's a new relationship building as well. So sometimes I felt that we may have to also adjust the way we look at our relationship with the person that we're caring for, since they are no longer exactly the same person as they were. So it's important for us to try to build a new relationship with them based on their understanding, based on their new reality. So another example I can give to you is, I know of this person who actually himself works in social service. So his mom is now being cared for in the nursing home. Okay? But the mom's condition has deteriorated to the point that the mom always recognizes him wrongly as the younger brother, no longer the son. And he embraced that. And he even actually posts on Facebook, on social media, saying that, my official new title now is younger brother. I'm no longer the son to my mom. He was able to actually take a light-hearted approach to it. So to him, he's able to accept the fact that my mom cannot recognize me as a son, but it's okay. If she believes that I'm his younger brother, then I'm his younger brother, and I'm willing to play the role of a younger brother. So that is very important, to seek to bond with a person with dementia. The next point, to celebrate. What do we celebrate? Hard to believe, right? What to celebrate in dementia? We want to celebrate the remaining abilities that the person with dementia still have, and not to always focus on the lost abilities or the disabilities. So for example, a simple activity like, for example, doing coloring, right, on a piece of paper. To us, it may not seem to be a big deal. It may not seem to be very difficult. But for a person with dementia, there's a lot of effort involved. For example, their eye and hand coordination has to be good. They have to be able to see where the lines are and to be careful to color within the lines. So all this takes a lot of effort. And we want to celebrate that, the fact that they are still able to do this. When they are able to eat on their own and enjoy a meal, we want to celebrate that as well. So we want to emphasize on what is still there, what are the abilities that are still there, and not to always just focus on what is already lost. The third is acceptance. I have to say that when it comes to dementia, acceptance can be very hard. It can be very challenging emotionally for family members to accept the fact that dementia, as of today, there is no cure. It's not easy to accept. I must say that they go through a lot of pain to accept that their loved ones is not going to be the same as before. They go through a lot of pain to accept the fact that dementia, as of today, there's still no cure. So that what we can do is only to manage the condition, to manage the relationship, but yet at the same time, knowing that the person with dementia will deteriorate with time as their condition progresses. So this acceptance is also very important. But I also want to highlight the fact that when we want to engage a person with dementia, it's also important for us to accept them for who they are now. Again, I can't emphasize enough the fact that a lot of times there is a sense of loss on the part of the caregivers. Seeing the one that they are caring for is so-called changing every few months or every year, and a lot of times losing some abilities. But the fact is that if we can accept them for who they are now, the caregiving becomes a little bit easier. Okay? And it's also easier for us to engage them in new ways, rather than hoping that they will go back to what they are previously and trying to so-called ask them to do things that are already too difficult for them to do. And the last part which I wanted to share is that engagement is very important, is perhaps reframing the situation. My own uncle, who is my late father's younger brother, he has dementia for more than 6 years now. In the initial few years when he was still physically mobile, able to walk around, there were situations when he doesn't walk in a very stable way. His gait is not very stable. So the daughter bought for him an umbrella, okay, a special umbrella, which is actually also a walking stick. So it's actually a walking stick camouflage as an umbrella, and pass it to him. Use this. So an elderly, many elderly that I came across with or without dementia, you don't like the idea of using walking aids. Because to them is, when I'm using walking aid, I'm telling people I'm old. I'm telling people I'm weak. Okay? So they do feel quite bad or feel lousy about using walking aids. Sometimes in our Hokkien language, they say lao kui. They felt lao kui to use walking aids because they are telling the whole world that they are old and they cannot walk properly. So they don't like the idea of walking aids. So what did my cousin do? That means her daughter, right? What did she do? She reframed the situation. She told the father, "Pa, this is my umbrella. Hold for me." Then my uncle's obliged. Okay, I hold the umbrella for you while using it. So this is actually the reframing of the situation is very helpful. Another example that I can share with you will be a lot of times doctors will always recommend, a person with dementia, they should actually try to be physically active, go out for walks as much as possible. Don't always stay at home. Don't be sedentary at home. And family members try to do that and try to tell the elderly, Pa or Ma, come, let's go down for a walk. Doctor say it's good for you. Good for you. The moment they hear that, they get very unhappy already. What do you mean good for me? I don't want to walk. I have no energy. Sienna, I want to stay at home. They refuse to cooperate. So another way to reframe this situation is this, just tell the senior, I want to go down and buy something, but I'm afraid I buy the wrong thing. Can you follow me to go down and choose for me the items? Or another way is, I need to buy a lot of things and it's too heavy for me to carry. Can you help me? Can you follow me down and help me to carry things? So by reframing the situation, instead of telling them that doing this is good for them, we actually seek their help. So we are actually eating the humble pie. We are actually telling them that, okay, I need your help. Can you follow me, go downstairs and do this, do that? They feel a lot better. So reframing, again, is very, very helpful. Right? It actually makes the person with dementia feel a lot more useful. They felt that they are wanted. They feel very good about themselves. So reframing the situation is very important. So sometimes we need not frame things in a situation whereby this is care for them, but we also can reverse the role and ask them for help. So this is also a very skillful way to engage them. So to end my sharing today, before we go to the Q&A, I'd like to share with you this quote I came across. I like it very much. This quote about communication. Right? So communication is understanding, not determining who's right. I like this very much, and I think it does links back to what I said earlier about don't argue, right? Yeah. So when we argue with a person, we are trying to decide or to determine who is right. But in caregiving for a person with dementia, being right perhaps is not so important. Understanding the person is more important. There is a saying that love is understanding. To love someone, we have to understand them. And communication is actually the bridge for us to reach out to this person, to understand them better, to enter their world, to enter their new reality. So this is a quote that I'd like to leave you with. And so let me just stop the screen sharing. Okay, so I would like to just maybe perhaps open up for questions. And if you feel comfortable, please just raise your hands and you can unmute yourself and just ask a question from here so that the rest can actually perhaps benefit from this sharing. And as I want to emphasize, we are all learning together. So no one is a teacher or an expert here. All of us are learning together. So if you have a question with regards to what I shared, please feel free to just raise your hands and unmute yourself and just ask.
Ivan.
Hi, Janet.
Hi. When the persons with dementia's cognitive abilities deteriorate to the advanced stage, what advice would you give in this area of communication?
Actually, Janet herself is a very experienced caregiver as well. Yeah, I think the main thing is as a person with dementia deteriorates, what we also learned was actually words may not be so effective, but simple things that sometimes what we call touch is actually more helpful. Okay, and again, I just want to highlight the fact that when a person with dementia starts to deteriorate further, increasingly they find it harder to rationalize the world around them. But they are using their heart to feel, to sense the world around them. So just now what you mentioned, you know, the non-verbal things like eye contact, you know, even the tone of voice, body language, all this makes a difference. But I'm aware of the fact that a lot of these person with dementia, when they're in the advanced stage, when their mobility is severely affected, they spend a lot more time on bed or on chairs. Simple touch, you know, by the person, by the carer, by the caregiver, is very helpful, because the touch itself has this ability to reassure the person with dementia, and also to make them feel connected. So touch is very helpful. You know, it's actually, can I also say it's very therapeutic. So I would say that, you know, the more advanced the stage is, perhaps the less we speak, but the more we try to connect with them emotionally. I want to just share, you know, that there is this so-called this therapy called Namaste Care. Not sure whether you have heard of it before. So Namaste Care is actually very much about engaging the senses in different ways, and it's not so much through language. So the more advanced the stage is, actually the less words will be better, but touch, you know, will be much better, much better. Visual cues, pictures, for example. So some of the caregivers that came across, for example, to help their loved ones to identify where the toilet is, they put up a toilet signage on the toilet door to help their loved ones to identify, to go to the correct door, you know, and not to be in the wrong place, for example. So visual cues are also very helpful. So sometimes when we talk about communication, we really have to look at it holistically. It's beyond just words. Yeah, visual cues, you know, eye contact, physical contact, and then body language. All these are part of communication.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenna. Thank you.
Evan, could I just check? Just now you mentioned about going step by step, right? So you give instructions step by step. So because how do I constantly remind myself to pace with this person with dementia? Because I may be sometimes, you know, a bit anxious, right? Rushing, right? And then yet I need to slow down and pace with him. What is your advice? What might help me do that?
I feel it's actually there's no shortcut to that. I observed that a lot of the very skillful caregivers, most of them, they learn through mistakes. That it's not you who decide how fast it should be. It's the person that you are caring for who decides how fast it will be. So after a few rounds of mistakes, I think they learn it. But I also felt that perhaps one small little tip that I would like to offer would be that perhaps every time when we are doing anything with them, take it as an opportunity to bond with them and not to complete a task. So for example, let's say for example the caregiver who brought the father out for a haircut, right? This sounds like a task or a chore that we need to do. But if we were to reframe it as this is an activity that enables me to spend more time with my loved ones, then the need to rush will be less. Because when we are very task-oriented, we want to rush things, right? Get it done and over with. But if we see this as an opportunity to bond with our loved ones, I think we will look at it very differently. Longer is okay, no problem. More time means more time to bond. Yeah. So I think that reframing is actually very helpful. So I think there's no really shortcut to it, but every one of us have to find our own way. But I really feel that the trying to redefine our relationship with the person that we are caring for is very helpful. To remind ourselves what is most important. So again, just like I mentioned about why do not argue, right? So again, is actually being right so important? Most of the time, 99% of the time, not so important. The only 1% of time when it is very important is when it concerns safety. Yes, that will be important. So for example, if your loved ones still can cook, right, and forget to off the gas stove, we have to off the gas stove. We have to be right in this case because there is safety issues involved. But 99% of the time, when safety is not involved, it's not an issue, a lot of times it's actually our ego versus their ego. Can I put it that way? We want to be right, you know, and we want to pull them into our reality. But we forgot that their reality is now different from us. and it's going to be more divergent as time goes. That means their reality is going to be further and further away from us. So they cannot come back to us, we can go to them. So communication is that bridge for us to go to them, to go into their world. Anybody else? If you, those of you who are so-called on off video, if you are happy to on your video and say wave your hand, I'll be very happy. You know, yeah. I'm quite used to actually giving talks in a room. You know, so Zoom is not so natural for me.
Ivan.
Yes, Colin, right?
Yeah. I've been taking care of my wife, who have dementia for the last 12 years.
Yes.
She's now at the advanced stage. All right, and she can't vocalize. So it makes it very difficult to communicate with her. I can only find out from her body language, you know, her facial expressions and whatever, right? Recently, she had a fall and was hospitalized for 12 days and have to undergo surgery for her fractured hip. Okay, she's now recuperating at home, but I can sense that because of her organizing time in the hospital during the circuit breaker, where I was not able to visit her because she relies on me, you know, very much. So I'm a bit concerned about that post-hospital syndrome that she's having. Can you advise me what more can I do to mitigate that syndrome? And what more can I do to take care of her?
Okay, I felt that this is a situation where it really takes time for her to get back used to life at home again. Okay, to begin with, I need to say that indeed, for many persons with dementia, hospitalization can be a very traumatic experience for them because they find themselves in a very unfamiliar environment, a lot of unfamiliar faces, and circuit breaker makes it worse because their loved ones couldn't visit them. Okay? They feel very insecure without their loved ones around. You know, so there's a lot of agitation involved. You know. So what I want to say is that, of course, if we can avoid, we want to avoid hospitalization for persons with dementia, especially. But in those situations where we cannot avoid, I think the least that maybe we can do, if it's ever possible, even during this situation, is at least talk to them over the phone, because sometimes voice, listening to a so-called familiar voice, is also very important. It's also helpful. If not, a video call where they can see a familiar face is also very helpful, because persons with dementia, they derive a lot of security by being surrounded by their loved ones, familiar faces, and also familiar surroundings. So I want to say that, you know, it cannot be helped that the hospital environment is alien to them because it is not home. Yeah. But I would say that, you know, the post-hospitalization part, you know, that I felt that it is something that takes time. We cannot rush it through. You know, they need, you know, it's just like a person who went through a trauma. We cannot ask a person to get out of trauma immediately. They take time to recover from the trauma. And I felt that they just need more love and more attention from their loved ones to feel, can I say, double reassured as compared to before hospitalization. But I really don't have a solution for, like, you know, how to do this well. But what I do know is that it takes time. It takes a long time, because to them, the whole experience of being hospitalized is just traumatic. It's just traumatic. And I'm not surprised to say that, you know, if they are ever hospitalized again, the trauma will be so-called, will come back again. Yeah. But so I just want to say that that's why actually in dementia care, a lot of times we are quite concerned with one issue, which is falls. Because when a fall occurs and the fall is serious enough, hospitalization is almost inevitable. Almost inevitable. And that is where it becomes very challenging. During, and especially COVID, it makes it even worse because the loved ones cannot visit as much as possible. Yeah. So yes, very tough situation, Colin. I totally agree with you. But I felt that, you know, all your wife needs from you is really more love, you know, and perhaps the touch, you know, yeah, do hold her hands more often to always reassure her, because I think also with dementia, what they need is actually they need to know you are there for them. That's very important. I come across another caregiver that the moms will keep calling out her name. Why? At first I didn't understand why, but later I realized that the mom kept calling out for the name of the daughter was because the mom wanted to make sure the daughter is there. It's as simple as that. So they just want to be sure that you are there for them. So wherever possible, you know, if you can be, if they can see us, it will be very helpful. If you are close enough to them, if you can hold their hands, it will be even better, because that actually creates the connection very directly. Okay, is it Sam? You want to unmute yourself? Hold on, you need to unmute yourself. I try. Okay. Can do it? Yeah. Or maybe, okay, we let Jaslyn first. Yeah, Jaslyn, you want to unmute yourself?
Hey, hi, Ivan.
Hi, Jaslyn.
Yeah, I figured since Seng is trying to figure out his milk. Yeah, yeah, I just wanted to find out. I mean, the scenario that you described about, you know, like bringing the dad to a haircut. It sounds like it's just a lengthy process, having to do it step by step. But there isn't a bit of. I mean, it didn't sound difficult. It's just more of like time consuming. But my situation here is my mom. I think she's in total denial of her situation. So it's a case where she will just keep arguing that she has done something when she actually has not. For example, she will argue that she has showered, or will argue that she has changed. But we are actually very quite sure that, you know, it's a lot of times she doesn't. And when we try to convince her, she will just you know, it's just total denial and always just keep arguing back and always want to win the situation. And it's just, you know, it's just difficult. And even when I try to speak nicely, I also get a lot of pushback. And and it's kind of erratic, because there are times when she, okay, maybe she, that day, you know, things fall in, but there are also times that many times that, you know, one day is fine, the next day maybe it's not.
Yes.
So it's like that there isn't even a pattern which is predictable that I could actually manage. So I'm just curious, is it common of this kind of denial, you know, and that situation, or, you know, how best to handle it?
Yes, I think it's very common. Actually, I'm not sure whether deny is the correct word to use, but I think probably they just don't recall whether they have done something, or sometimes when they did not do it, they say they have done it. Okay, the one thing that I would like to maybe suggest or to understand a bit more would be, you know, if let's say your mom, for example, right, she stays at home most of the time, okay, and there are times when, for example, she just refuses to bathe. It does happen, right, on a bad day. Is it an issue to you to accept the fact that, let's say for one day she skipped bathing?
No,
Is it?
frankly, it's not. It's just that at times it just goes on for too long.
Sure. Okay. So I think another. So sometimes I do know of some caregivers. They are quite skillful a bit, whereby they give them a reason to bathe. You know? Okay, so for it could be something like, you know, okay, we are actually going out to meet this, say, a very good friend or very good relative. You know, yeah. So I think we must make sure that we go out very clean and smells very good. You know, so, you know, even though you have bathed already, would you like to bathe one more time? You know? And make sure that when we meet that person, right, you know, it's a kind of respect to the person. So it depends on what really works lah. Or another way is it could be that you entice them with a meal, for example, to say, you know, we are going out for dinner, jia hou liao, you know, we're having good food, you know, and if you don't bathe well, you know, we go to the restaurant, everybody will look at us, you know. something like this.
Yeah, I mean that sounds good, but but if it doesn't happen, that means the you know the fact about visiting someone or going for a good meal doesn't happen. Won't that person feel like, you know, like you're bluffing or
Yeah. So
or
the
you
thing,
think that she'll just forget about it? I don't know.
okay, so I think the fact is that, right, if you try and if after bathing, if they really want to go out, if they're okay, bring them out for a while. Because the fact is that, right, again, I mentioned about the diversion strategy. A lot of times, at that moment when they are so-called emotionally very charged up, they don't respond to logic, or rationale very much. What we need to do is to actually get them to change their emotional state, okay? Entice them with something that makes them happy, okay? But after that, we get them to do something and then forget about what was being said earlier. I know there's some risk involved. I don't totally deny. Sometimes they may remember, right? But if they do remember, is it okay to bring them out for a walk? Things like that, or really bring them out for a meal? But what I felt was that what we are trying to do is really not to confront them. I think that's very important, because a lot of times we find it very, the situation become very challenging because it started to become confrontational. It's me versus my mom, for example, or my dad, okay, and he's uncooperative. So the way we look at the situation also makes a lot of difference towards how we respond to them. And I do fully acknowledge the fact that, just like all of us here, we do have a good day and a bad day. So sometimes when they're on a bad mood day, we may just have to accept the fact that, okay, leave them as it is for today, and we will, so to speak, we will live to fight another day. Yeah, okay. We just have to accept it. Yeah, that is so much the nature of the condition, which we cannot totally predict. You are right, we cannot totally predict. Yeah, but we try to find different ways.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Sam, you?
Yeah, yes. During this COVID time, since February until March up now, my mother has been staying at home almost all the time, except one or two instances where she go out to see doctor. Other than that, she's being locked up in the house throughout this period. So now I notice that she's getting very agitated, unreasonable, and start scolding the maid most of the time, 24 hours. And I just don't know how to handle the situation like this. She even, and lately, for the last 2-3 months, she even mistaken me as the brother or her grandfather. She see me, she call me a different name and refer me to another person. I was wondering whether her situation has been due to this lockup at home over this long period.
Yeah. So Sam, I think your situation, it's hard to say whether it's due to COVID or not, but I think COVID is a difficult period for person with dementia as well. But maybe the question that I will ask is, if let's say he mistaken you for somebody else, the brother or the grandfather, the important question to ask you is, are you able to embrace this new role? Because if you're able to embrace this new role and play along with her on this role, it may actually help. So for example, if he believes you are his grandfather, right, it's more likely she will listen to you, because you are the grandfather. But if you are the son, she may not be so willing to listen to you. So sometimes I felt that, again, it is us who is actually find it hard to accept the rationalizing part. But if you are able to try to embrace this new reality of our loved ones and play that role with them, sometimes we may be able to find a way out of the situation. But also I want to highlight the other thing is, right, in some situation where the person with dementia suddenly shows a lot of temper, right, becoming verbally abusive, or even sometimes physically a bit abusive, like pinching people, do pay attention to whether the fact that they are actually feeling unwell or they are experiencing some form of pain. If needed, please go and see a doctor immediately, because sometimes they can't verbalize their pain and they will express it in terms of in anger, so verbally abusive or even physically pinching people. because they have discomfort on their own body and they are not able to verbalize. So in such situation, I would highly recommend quickly see a doctor. If it persists for a period of time. So for a person who used to be gentle but suddenly becomes abusive, there could be pain involved. So do see a doctor for it. Or it could, and the pain could be due to an infection, for example. So I do feel that if there's a very drastic change and persists for a few days, it's good to seek medical consultation to be safe. To be safe. I think my time is almost up, right?
Yeah.
Clarice, some announcements?
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. Right, we would like to really appreciate what Ivan has shared. And on this topic about coping with, coping strategies, right? Please do join us in the next webinar. Maybe we should put the slide up. 1 minute, let us share the slide. Yeah? Yeah. So so the next webinar is actually on the 13th of October, right? Also at 7:30, right? There's a QR code which you can scan. We will also, with your permission, send you the link to register, right? The electronic mailer to register. What I would really appreciate now is if you can take your camera and scan the evaluation QR code. We really would like to have some feedback because this is the first webinar we are holding. We have a series of 12 webinars. So we are running all the way until June next year. So please take your camera out and scan the QR code. Give us some feedback. We would like to improve and learn more to make it better for you. There's also a link in the chat. Is there a link in the chat?
Scan the QR code here.
Yeah, scan the QR code, which the mouse, I'm pointing the mouse here on top here. The first one, next to the thank you. That's the evaluation QR code. All right, so I will still send you the link to the registration because I have your email, and I really appreciate the session that we had today is very fruitful, and thank you very much. So have a very good evening ahead. We'll see you again on the 13th of October. All right, have a good night. Bye-bye.